by popular request, we're going to go over Tesla Motors annual report. So, just to give you some context, oftentimes when we're looking at these annual reports, first of all, the way to find it is I always search like the company name and then IR, which stands for Investor Relations. You could search for the 10K or the 10Q directly if you typically is where all these documents are held. It's one of the easier ways to find it. Some of these companies put them right on their homepage or make them easy to find. Some of them don't, and maybe Tesla doesn't want you to find them. I don't know, but I've just found it's easier to come directly to their investor relation page to dig through them. Next thing you want to do, if you're looking for like the current balance sheet or how much cash Tesla has or how much sales they've had, I would actually suggest go and look for just the latest quarterly filing. For example, we're recording this in October 2017. Their annual report came out months and months ago. So if you're trying to find the latest quarterly numbers and how Tesla's doing at the very moment, just go look for the latest 10Q, this one back in August, so fairly recent, and you're going to be able to find the numbers there. But for today's purposes, we're going to look at this annual report. And this was published earlier in the year, and typically it depends on when the company's year kind of rolls over. But in Tesla's case, it's March 1st, 2017. So we're going to take a look at this annual report. But for context, what I want to do is I want to show you at the current price right now, Tesla's share price is $356.88. And full disclosure, I do own some shares of Tesla. So just get that out of the way here. Now, this share price is only like half the story, okay? Because, you look at a company like Apple. Apple's share price is $155. Does that mean Tesla's company is worth 2 times Apple? No. And most people know that the market cap of the company is essentially the share price times roughly that number of outstanding shares. And in Tesla's case, we get to basically a $60 billion with a B market cap. Now, compare that to Ford, okay? Before we get to Apple, compare that to Ford. Yes, Ford stock is at $12.31. Their market cap is 50. Okay, Tesla makes 3 cars. Their market cap is 60 billion. Ford has basically invented the car. Their market cap is 50 billion. So, whether or not we're living in a bubble or not, I'll let you decide. But that's pretty remarkable if you're a Tesla shareholder, which I am. And as you can see here, you can look at the performance of the stock. And yes, the stock could retrace a good 20 or 30%, and I'm still up significantly on my investment just over the last year. But anyways, Tesla stock is double what Apple is. But let's look at Apple's market cap. Apple's market cap, $802 billion. So the share price, if you're a total beginner to the stock, share price only tells you half the story. Really what you're doing based on the market cap. And in Tesla's case, it is 60 billion. And in comparison, Ford, the originator of the automobile and the assembly line, and basically is synonymous with cars, is at a $50 billion valuation. So, wow, that's pretty impressive. Now, back to Tesla's annual report. So here it is, Form 10K. This 10K, I think, stands for, I don't know, annual. 10Q is if you're looking for kind of the quarterly numbers and are typically more focused on the financials of the companies. These annual reports typically outline more of a broader strategy and a lot of text, and I'll skim through as much of it as I can. And there's a lot of valuable information in here. Once you know where to go inside these accounts, you can click on these different things and it's going to take you to that section. So it's pretty neat. If Tesla is a company we're all aware of. They make sexy fully electric cars, and they're getting into, they bought Solar City, and so they're into solar power, and they're going to make a truck, and who knows what else Elon Musk is going to come out with. But if you were not from, Tesla, substitute Tesla for some micro cap company, and you might have no idea, some software company, and you have no idea what they do. This business overview is an awesome way to kind of get to know what the company does. And I often go through these. In Tesla's case, we're not going to go, we know they bring the Model 3, I think, until 3 or 4 months later. And at the current moment, they're still ramping up production of that. But if you didn't know anything about Tesla, this overview would be perfect. And in some cases, this Solar City acquisition, you might know more about the cars than Solar City's business model. So this kind of tells you some, pretty cool, to have some facts about Solar City. And it's a small part of the company, so it's not something I'm going to focus on right now. But if you were curious about Solar City, this 10K does have a lot of good information in there. Again, it tells you about their different model cars, which is pretty neat. And it gets into their energy storage business, which is Solar City. And it's going to talk to you about the different technology. Again, most people that are aware of Tesla and maybe into automobiles are going to be really aware of their technology and maybe have test drive or maybe even owned one of their cars. And, they have this autopilot system, which is kind of neat and could is a big reason why Tesla has such a large valuation compared to Ford and even other companies out there. Talks about their design and engineering, which is pretty cool. Sales and marketing. This is actually really interesting because, Tesla owns its own stores and they call them galleries. So they actually distribute their cars. Here you see 265 locations. There's got to be that many Ford locations, maybe in the whole state of California. So you can tell Tesla's got, while its valuation is larger than Ford, still a pretty small company in comparison. So it talks to you about that, talks to you about their supercharger network. All this stuff is actually kind of interesting. Again, we're familiar with Tesla. We might be less familiar with their energy storage business, so reading through this might be something worth doing. It tells you the manufacturing, so they're manufacturing in the state of Nevada. I believe they have they have 2 locations out here in California, and you can always see them. You drive by these facilities and you see Teslas on the rack of semis all the time. They have it looks like a headquarters in the Netherlands. They have this gigafactory which produces batteries in Nevada. They talk about their supply chain, more vehicle stuff, tax incentive. This is really interesting. So they get tax incentives for the gigafactory for building and attracting, high building these manufacturing plants. States want that. So there are also regulatory credits, I believe, that relate to the cars themselves. So this is kind of interesting, probably worth going through at some point. There's different regulation, obviously, with something like a car. And we'll keep moving through this stuff. Competition. This is kind of interesting. They actually name competitors by name, which is kind of interesting. Again, in this case, we know Audi makes cars. We know BMW makes cars, Lexus, Mercedes. We're familiar with this. But if this, again, was some micro cap, blog or, not blog, but micro cap software company, well, they're going to rattle off some of their competition, and maybe you find that, I don't want to invest in the micro cap software company, but hey, their competitors look like compelling investments. So that's what I always find inside these reports is kind of interesting when they start talking about the competition. In this case, we are very aware of and maybe have owned cars of the competition, but in a less, on a field way less about. This competition might lead to other investments or other research that you can be doing. Again, talks more about the employees. It's kind of neat. 17,000 employees. Solar City. Look, Solar City's pretty big. 12,000 full-time employees. So they basically doubled the size of their workforce with this acquisition. So it wasn't a small matter, a small acquisition in terms of headcount. So they had to take on a lot of employees. So pretty neat. Risk factors. So this whole section, we could actually have the entire video reading these risk factors if we wanted to, because they're extensive and they're actually quite interesting when it comes to Tesla. A lot of times with some of these companies, these risk factors are kind of plain vanilla, like, if a hurricane hits us or something like that. But with Tesla, we may experience delays in timelines, and they're actually doing that right now. So their Model 3 right here, they actually outlined this risk factor, and this actually came true. A lot of this did. So it's, you could have read this back in March. Now, did it predict what the price was doing? Not really, because the stock price is not going to, rise and fall based on these risk factors, but they are very interesting to read. They might not be able to eat their growing, production plans, which is great. This word growing is in here. So they spin it as a positive, but if too many delays, all of a sudden, Mercedes might come out with a really compelling electric car, and instead of waiting a year to get one, I can go to the Mercedes dealership right up the street and go get one. Certainly, the longer they delay, it kind of goes away or gets less, I think is a better way to describe it. We're dependent on suppliers. Obviously, this is like all car manufacturers. And again, I'm not going to go through each of these risk factors. This video is really to kind of enlighten you, kind of show you that these are here. And in Tesla's case, a lot of the time you're kind of aware of these risk factors, but you might not know the full extent or want to know, hey, what about this lithium ion? It's, it's a rare, it's not rare, not necessarily rare, but it is like a finite amount of lithium likely on Earth. So it might talk about some of this and how they rely on this kind of like, this metal or this, they rely on this element is a better way to put it. And boy, it could harm the business. Lithium ion all of a sudden surges in price or demand or whatever, and it could harm Tesla's business because their whole car relies around lithium ion batteries. So lots, again, the risk factors are extensive on here, and they go on for pages and pages and pages. And again, I don't want to just use the whole time of this video to go over these risk factors, but I'm not saying, there's interesting ones. Again, this is the last one we'll cover. Elon Musk, who's the CEO of Tesla, has pledged shares of our common stocks to secure certain borrowings. I would definitely read this, because this sentence is key. If Mr. Musk were forced to sell these shares pursuant to a margin call that he would not avoid or satisfy, such sales could cause our stock price to decline. Because Elon Musk, I believe, is the number one holder, but he is not holding all this with straight cash. He is essentially on borrowed money through the broker, the bank that he's holding these shares with. And if the bank were to say, hey, Mr. Musk, we've noticed you've got a lot of shares of Tesla and not a lot of cash on hand. We need you to either increase the cash in your account or sell a lot of these Tesla shares that you have, so we can feel more comfortable about, their bank borrowings, which is essentially the money the bank has lent Mr. Musk. So if Mr. Musk were all of a sudden have to raise cash by selling Tesla stock, better believe the stock's going to go down. So I love how they bury this one kind of at the end. This might be one of the number one risk factors. If is a bank going to force him to sell? Maybe not, probably not. But if it does happen, that is going to immediately, they can have, delays in manufacturing and all kinds of stuff can happen to the stock. But if this guy starts selling stock, it's going to trigger a lot of other people doing the same. So, properties. This is always neat to kind of go through and see all the properties that Tesla either owns. Some of it they actually own, which is kind of a real asset. And a lot of this stuff is also leased, and you can also see when the lease comes up, and not always particularly, important, I guess, especially with the size of company Tesla is, but maybe with a smaller company, they've got a lease coming up. That might be favorable if it's a bad lease, but it might also be not favorable if it's a really good lease or one that's signed a long time ago and now rent's going up or they're going to have to move or whatever. Legal proceedings Thought this would be a little bit longer, but it's not for whatever reason. But not particularly entertaining in terms of Tesla, but certainly with some of these smaller companies, they're, a company, uh, almost all companies, unless they're really forced to do it, are not going to be putting out press releases and talking about this stuff on conference calls or really, making a big deal about legal proceedings. But some of these smaller companies, it is like a big deal, and you can kind of find out about them kind of digging through there. Um, some of this other stuff we'll kind of go through. This is it showing you a high and low price of Tesla shares over the last year, and it kind of shows you where it was the year before. So, and along the different quarters. So, pretty interesting. You can see, boy, this is not necessarily a volatile stock, but one that has gone, it's somewhat volatile to the upside. But if you'd bought up here and it went down here, you'd probably be feeling it a little bit. But interesting there. Stock performance graph again. I bought Tesla stock a while ago. The stock could, everybody's like, hey, it's overvalued. It's going to come crashing down. Well, yeah, it could come crashing down a little bit, and I'd still be doing okay with my investment. Now we get consolidated financial data. So just kind of a quick overview. This is really helpful. Okay, again, earlier I told you you could go to the 10Qs of Tesla. So we're at the annual reports. If you want to know like the latest and greatest sales numbers and all the cash balance, go to the quarterly report. However, if you want to analyze it over a yearly basis, so you're trying to look at Tesla over like year over year. You were like, how did it do back in 2012? How did it do back in 2013? The annual report is really good at kind of a yearly view, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. So we see Tesla, again, these numbers are probably going to be in thousands. Yeah, it says that here in thousands. So we're adding 3 extra zeros here. So Tesla back in 2013, 2012, this is like not that much money, okay? It's like $400 million. They're probably selling one model of car. And as we've seen over the years, the popularity, now we're at the $1 billion mark, 7 billion. This is in part why investors are granting it a valuation greater than Ford, because Ford is not growing its top line, which is revenues here, at this rate. This is pretty spectacular. Obviously, Tesla's a really young company, and they're borrowing a lot of money to get to this. They're not making any money, but to grow your top line, that's how you get a top line valuation. Oftentimes, is growing your top line in 5 years from 413 million to over 7 billion. Gross profit. This line, I like to compare, like, okay, last year we were at 4 billion in sales. This year we're at 7 billion, not quite a double. Okay. So how does gross profit scale up? As Tesla scales up, we want to see this gross profit scale up in at least kind of a similar fashion as this. And in this case, it is. 923 million in gross profit. Now we got 1.6 billion, not quite a double. So it is scaling up nicely. If Tesla were able to turn this 7 billion, put 2017 here, they were to scale it up maybe into the $13 billion range, you'd like to see this, a shade over 3 billion in terms of gross profit. If that continues, but borrowing any, other outside kind of negative forces, the stock should do pretty well, because this is what investors are looking for. Loss from operations. Also, we're seeing this scale down, which is exactly what you want. Okay, you want to see these numbers scale up. You want to see if the company's making a loss. You want to see that start to scale down, because if this number was getting bigger, it would basically be showing yes, Tesla's getting larger, but this number is getting even bigger. And we notice here, all the way back in 2012, they probably had significant investments, maybe in terms of some kind of investment occurred here, because we can see the number went way down here and back up. But this number actually went down. So that's good. We're seeing, loss from operations. We're seeing it scale up relatively nicely. There's some lumpiness in here that's, probably you could do some further investigation into, but this is scaling up in the direction that we want it to. Another thing that's scaling up in the upward direction, a number of outstanding shares. Okay, to compute this net loss, essentially this loss per share. So they're using this number here, 100, and I'm assuming this is in millions as well. Oh no, except for share data. So 100. No, this is probably in thousands still. So that's 107 million, 107 million shares, and we've seen that's gone up as they've raised money, issued shares to executives and employees. This number is likely going to trend up in the near future, and this is negative for you, the shareholder. Okay, because owning one share was one in 107 million shares. Now owning that same one share, you're now one of 144. Obviously, the company has grown, and that's what you need, and that's why your investment has grown over this time period as well. We'll keep moving through some of this stuff. Some of this stuff is going to, again, now they're going to look, different outlook. This is kind of interesting, actually. They're going to talk about automotive demand. They're going to talk about all kinds of little stuff in here that's actually pretty cool. Their financing options, which is kind of interesting and probably worth looking into. They're going to look into their Gigafactory and their manufacturing. Look, they're already talking about Gigafactory 2 here, which is pretty cool. They're going to talk about accounting policies and estimates. This is all worth reading. I'm kind of grazing over it here, but it's definitely worth kind of reading, especially on a company that you're less familiar with, or that you're taking your first kind of dip into, kind of, investigation into. Definitely worth looking into. Direct leasing program. So it describes how, this is describing all about how they take care of the cars, the maintenance, the energy generation. This is, has to do with Solar City and their loans that they give out for that. Inventory valuation. So Tesla's got Model S's and X's and stuff sitting around. And so they based on, they show you how they calculate that. They got warranties outstanding. They've got stock-based compensation. They've got lots of different things in here. This is kind of interesting. So these were the market conditions for vesting tranches, which is, for CEO, basically for the CEO. These things have got to happen for the CEO of the company to get his bonus, his or her bonus. And these are kind of interesting to definitely read through whenever you're going through a company, because, you'd like to see the CEO, the performance of the company tied to how much compensation that the CEO is going to get. So I kind of like that. Income taxes. So it talks about income taxes and Tesla's out here in California. I don't know if they're getting any kind of, help from the state of California. Likely not. But, we'll talk about income taxes a little bit more later on. More about business combinations. It talks, I don't know if it'll talk about Solar City in there, but let's get down to some of the fun stuff. Results from operations. So this is revenue. Again, in an annual report, you're going to see a year over year comparison. In the quarterly reports, you're going to see quarter over quarter. So it'd be like, quarter 3 2016 over quarter 3 2015. Sometimes they give you 6 months, a 6-month view, or maybe a year-to-date view. But what I like about the annual reports is it gives you a kind of a broad-based year-over-year comparison. So you can see how Tesla or whatever company you're looking at is scaling up, in terms of prior years. And it's a full year comparison as well, which is kind of nice. Sometimes a quarter can be lumpy, or some weird stuff can happen. This takes a whole year into account. So we're seeing their automotive is scaling up pretty nicely. What's really scaling up nicely is these leases. So I kind of like that. Definitely, if you're a shareholder, you can see the percentage of change here is nice. Tesla, if it keeps these numbers in this high or higher, the share price, I don't want to sit here and predict the share price, but this is what's going to keep it at least at its current level. The company's got to keep growing at this rapid pace. Otherwise, you will see, I can guarantee you, the shares will go down unless Elon Musk just starts pulling off miracle after miracle. Shows you the total revenues. Again, this is a number that we saw earlier. Um, and it's a number that we'll keep seeing. In here, this is cool. What I always like about annual reports is sometimes this is often on the 10Qs too, but they show you the numbers here, and if you're like kind of confused about these numbers, here with Tesla it's kind of easy, but maybe with a software company or a biotech company or something, it's like more confusing. Well, normally below they'll explain it in plain English. So automotive revenue increased 2.16 billion. So you're seeing it right here, or 63% to 5.9 billion for the year. And then oftentimes it'll tell you why the increase in volume is primarily due to the Model X, okay, as well as increased production of the Model S. So it tells you right here why, essentially why the company thinks they're in some cases it's an increase here, but maybe it declined. Maybe, this other company's declined 63%. And you're like, damn, what happened? Well, typically they tell you, at least in so many words, right there. So, and they copy and paste 2015 compared to 14 and so on. So moving forward, this is cost of revenue. This is always important to see how much it cost them. So here again, the sales numbers are here. And now we're kind of starting to see, here's the total revenue here. Here's the gross profit and more gross profit. And we're seeing the margin here as well, which is kind of an interesting number for Tesla. 2014. Notice that margins have declined since 2014, but they were the same year over year. And you definitely, if you're an investor in Tesla, I don't know where you want this to be. I'm sure it won't stay this high for the length of the company, but you're hoping that it stays north of 20%. I don't want to put a specific number on it, but this gross profit margin is an important number for Tesla. And the fact that it stayed the same year over year is kind of interesting. That's a number when the 2017 report comes out or year end, you kind of want to compare that to these prior years as well. Research, now they're going to started breaking out these expenses. And again, with a Tesla, which is a growing company, you want to see that these expenses are not getting away from them or not getting too big. And here's a really cool line: as percentage of revenue. So yes, this number has doubled since 2014, but as we saw, Tesla's revenue has way more than doubled over just it might have doubled over this period of time. So we see as a percentage of revenues, this 464 was 14% of revenues back in this. So we actually see that as a percentage of revenue, research and development actually has gone down. Yes, the total number has gone up. The total dollar amount has gone up. But as a percentage of revenue, it's actually gotten smaller. And so you always want to keep that in mind as an investor. Yes, the actual dollar amount gets bigger, but if the company is growing at a faster rate than this number will go down, and that's actually kind of a good sign in most cases. Selling, general, and administrative. This is all kinds of, typically they tell you what it's for: personnel and facilities rates for stores, marketing, sales. In this case, it's pretty self-explanatory. Other companies might not be. Again, we see that this number is fairly constant. Sometimes I'm researching companies and it goes from like 60% to like 110% or something like that. And it's like, whoa, what happened? Did they hire a bunch of people? Did something go wrong? Did revenues just fall? You can kind of see the efficiency of a company based on this as percentage of revenue, and we're seeing Tesla's doing a fairly nice job of keeping that cost in check. Interest expense is exactly what you think it is. It is money basically Tesla borrows, and it's like almost like you're on your credit card or your mortgage, you're paying interest, and Tesla's doing the same. And again, we're seeing, yes, Tesla is paying more and has brought on more debt, but as a comparison to revenue, it's actually at a 3-year low in terms of percentage of their revenue. So not bad. Again, some pretty efficient stuff there. Other income, which has got to be, yeah, foreign exchange gains. This is, it's not a big number. It's not a huge number. And again, this number will fluctuate from a loss to a tiny gain to maybe a larger gain. And it's only 1.6 percentage of revenue. If this is a bigger piece of the company, then you are not necessarily investing a lot into the company. Maybe you're investing more in their CFO's ability to, play these foreign currency markets, and that's kind of a huge red flag when this is such a huge percentage of revenues, especially on a consistent basis. And yes, not on a big mega cap company like Tesla, but on micro cap companies, sometimes you see some funky stuff going on down here. Provision for income taxes. Now, this is one of the sections I kind of wanted to talk about, because as we can see here, they're provisioning more for income taxes because they're generating more income. And again, they describe it here in international jurisdiction. So that actually might tell you something, because what I was going to say is this provision for income tax, well, it's based on the tax code that is currently in place. If you have a president who lowers the income taxes or changes the tax, well, this could, very much favorably benefit the company. But this, again, says taxable income in international jurisdictions. I'm not an expert on that. I just know the U.S. is trying to change this. At least the current administration is trying to change this. And so that could favorably help Tesla if they had allocated X amount of dollars for income taxes, and all of a sudden that changes. Well, all of a sudden they've got this extra amount of money that they thought they were going to go to tax is now sitting on the books, and maybe going forward changes kind of their budgeting and stuff. So just some things I wanted to talk about. Liquidity. That doesn't mean how much water has, flooded the Tesla headquarters. No, it means how much money they have in the bank. And in this situation, they have about $3 billion in principal sources of liquidity. So not all cash, but for the most part is cash. Showing you how much cash they've used in operating activities. That's operating the company that is making the cars, etc., running Tesla as we know it. Net cash used in investing activities. This is borrowing money, typically paying back the money. And we can see this is a big negative, because Tesla is borrowing lots of money to fuel their growth and fuel the production of their cars. Next, net cash provided in financing activities. This is Tesla. This is almost like all the money that they borrowed, or their money that they gained by financing either the stock or borrowing money from a bank, etc. So, and again, it'll describe it here probably much better than I just did. Operating lease obligations. For a company like Tesla, again, these numbers, it's showing you a total number here, and it's kind of scary. The total number is kind of scary, but if they break it out years going forward, you see that, well, again, it's some years it's bigger than others, but it's manageable as long as Tesla keeps growing that top line. This long-term debt appears manageable. They're going to have to keep growing. But you got to assume this debt is being used to grow the company. So as long as this is used effectively, they should be able to meet these obligations. They're going to have to keep raising money along the way. But when your stock's at 300 some odd dollars, it's probably not particularly hard to raise money. They have currency risk. They have interest rate risk. Right now, interest rates are low, and you got to love that. That's part of one of the biggest reasons probably why Tesla has done so well, is that, interest rates are so low, they can borrow money, and it encourages people to invest in stocks instead of, more safe assets and stuff. So this is, PricewaterhouseCoopers has certified this back in March. Here's some cool stuff now. Finally, we're getting to, the balance sheet essentially. So I won't go through this whole thing. You can have a whole lesson on the balance sheet. Probably will put up a video like that at some point. Tesla's balance sheet may not, if you're a beginner trying to read a balance sheet, might not be the best one to go through. But we'll highlight some of the, cash and cash equivalents. As we see, Tesla's cash has grown. As we saw, they actually had a loss from operation. So this has grown through borrowing money. Now you would have to dig through. Maybe a smaller company might not make that as obvious, or you might not know that off the top of your head. You might look, cash has grown $2 billion. Well, yeah, they raised a lot of money as well. This inventory number, this is like really key with a company like Tesla, but also like I did a video a while back on Under Armour. And Under Armour has tanked since I put up that video, and I'm pretty sure that I basically implied that it would during that video because they had inventory problems. Under Armour had inventory problems. We'll keep going through here. I knew Under Armour a little bit more intimately than I do Tesla. Full disclosure, I've been short Under Armour as well, and it's been the worst performing stock in the S&P 500. Probably close that out here pretty soon and actually go long. But anyways, inventory, $1.2 billion worth of inventory back in 2015. Now we got $2 billion. Again, somewhat manageable, you'd think. You'd also expect a company like Tesla, which inventory consists of $100,000 cars. You'd expect this number to be pretty big, and it is. But you wouldn't want to see this number really get huge and balloon. This is a number that kind of you want to monitor. It shows you how well Tesla is balancing the kind of stuff that they have in inventory, including the finished goods, which are the cars themselves. So, prepaid. Look at this, accounts receivable. So this maybe have to do with leases and maybe even the Solar City business as well, but quite a bit bigger. So a lot of people, not a lot of people, but more people over the year before are due to send Tesla some money. Liabilities. We can come down here to long-term debt. So we notice the cash position increased over $2 billion. Notice the long-term debt increased, about $3.8 billion. So key number here to look at. Also, another thing to kind of point out, total assets at Tesla, $22 billion. Remember I showed you earlier the market cap, $60 billion. So you're paying 3 times the total assets for the company, okay, in terms of market cap. That's pretty remarkable. So not a cheap stock by any means. Not, it is $300, but from a valuation perspective, even less cheap. Okay, $300 a share is really not that much if you have enough in your account. But a $22 billion in assets and you're paying a $60 billion valuation on the public markets. Pretty rich there. Total liabilities still in check. Okay, still in check at 16 billion, and some of these liabilities get canceled out on the asset side and all that. But pretty interesting. So moving on. This is the statements from operation. I love this page. This is like my favorite page. The balance sheet is cool, but I love these statements of operation because it kind of gives you it all kind of in a rundown here. So we have the automotive revenue, we have leasing, we have energy storage, and we have a total revenue number here. And we can see again, this, scales up. Now we get the expenses right underneath, which I love to see. Okay, we got total revenue here, and we got total cost of those revenues right here. That's how we get to our gross profit number, which is always a number that you want to take a look at. We have more operating expenses here. Okay, so these aren't the only expenses right here. Okay, we got more operating expenses here. Now we've got a total loss kind of from operations here. Notice it actually got a little bit smaller. So that's probably a pretty good sign. And this is the net loss attributable to you, the common shareholder. otherwise known as $4.68 a share. And here's the comprehensive losses. You factor in some other stuff. As long as these notice that these numbers are we're at a big number. This is a big number. Okay, this is a big number. Okay, this is a big number, but it's really close to this. This is really close to this. This is really close to this. So this doesn't bring up any red flags. However, sometimes you'll be looking at a company and these numbers will be very big difference. And so that's when you want to really take a close look at what the heck is all this stuff in here. Okay, in this case, we don't have to worry about it. But if these numbers were really, the comprehensive loss was way different than the net loss attributed to the shareholder, then you kind of want to get in there and see what the heck happened. Oftentimes, it is some kind of derivative or, currency or, currency adjustment, which can happen. But in today's time, it really hasn't recently. So, or it hasn't affected Tesla. It does happen a lot. It just hasn't affected Tesla. This is really talking about if you want to know, hey, what's all this debt? How much, they showed you how much, issuance of common stock here, 215 a share, 242 a share. They've got some of these other, stock-based compensation. They've got warrants. They purchased some bond, hedges. They've got convertible notes. Okay. Tesla's got they're borrowing all this money. And here it is kind of broken down. Now, a consolidated statements of cash flow. This is the cash flowing through the business. So it's showing you, here's the net loss. This was a number that's picked up from above. And now it's showing you all this other stuff that was kind of outlined here. Stock-based compensation, inventory write-downs. These are all, I'm kind of blowing through these. And in some cases we can, because some of these are not huge, massive numbers, especially a number like this, or especially when it doesn't exist. But, some of these numbers are actually really big. Like, look at this. This is $2 billion. This is, an inventory and operating lease vehicle. So you kind of expect, again, on a $100,000 car, kind of expect a number like this to be fairly large in relation to the other numbers on here. So, again, we're seeing how cash is flowing through the business and how it flows all the way down. I always like this number too. Cash and equivalents at the beginning of the year. You always see this on the consolidated statements of cash flows. Like, here's cash at the beginning of the year. Here's cash at the end of the year. So it shows you how the cash was affected over the course of the year. Always kind of an interesting thing to look at. And again, now here we are again. This was the thing about these annual reports. You see it, and it's like this 100-page document, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to read all that. Well, you don't have to read it all. And that's kind of what I'm trying to show you here. Now we're going to go back over the overview of the company again. Some of this stuff is not repeated, but it's kind of, giving you an overview of how some of this stuff is calculated. And again, here we go, much more finite and detailed. This is based on the resale value guarantee, based on kind of leases. And it's it's really detailed, and they're kind of showing you everything. They're showing you that revenue is actually deferred and how much of it's deferred. Here's the resale guarantee, which is a liability. In this case, it's a pretty big liability, actually. So if the resale value of Teslas were really tank, this would become a very, key metric here, because they've guaranteed the value of the car. And if they were to tank for whatever reason, then this is going to really affect the company. Okay. Regulatory credits. So it's talking about how California and other states, are allowing Tesla to give rebates to customers, or the state is actually awarding rebates to the customer for buying an electronic vehicle. That won't last forever. Although, you got liberal politicians, it might, they give out this is like the definition of a liberal politics right here. Okay. They give you handouts if you're poor. They give you handouts if you don't have a job or you get injured on the job. You get handouts if you can't feed your baby, which I think is probably a good idea. They give you handouts if you can't pay your rent. They give you handouts for health care. And yes, in California, they give you handouts for your Tesla. If you buy a Tesla, you're going to get money back from the state of California. Thank you, liberal politicians. Anyways, moving on. More stuff in here. They talk about the cost of revenue. Again, this is all these numbers that we just went over, but kind of like explained in text. So one of the things is like, if you were like, man, what's deferred revenue? Well, you could copy this and do like a control F or a find and replace on this page and go search for the word deferred revenue. Or what's an operating lease? What's depreciation expense? Or what's this resale value guarantee? Maybe you go through here and you're like, what the heck is this? Well, search for this term, and then oftentimes it will show up along here. I'll do this all the time when I'm searching through a company. Maybe I want to search for someone's name, the CEO's name, or a bank's name, or a certain shareholder's name, or a certain product, or a competitor. You do a control, on it's like control F, and it'll bring up some kind of, it might freeze my computer, but it essentially brings up a place where you can paste that into, and you can start finding, different kind of stuff. You can find the term that you're looking for. And it's really helpful in these big, long documents where you might be looking for one thing in particular. But it's talking about all their stuff, and it explains it kind of in plain English. So it's sometimes a little bit easier than if you don't know what the number means, you can come and find it down here kind of in plain English, which is always pretty neat. Showing you how many shares were awarded for the employees, and yeah, it's a high number, but you want the employees to be in line with your interest, which is owning shares of the company. So I don't typically mind this unless there are times when this is a little egregious and you don't like to see it very large, but in a growing company like this, I don't mind it. Still, again, we're skimming through a lot of this stuff. Doesn't necessarily have to be skimmed over, but again, we're kind of moving through this. Warranties. This is a company that probably provides warranties on both ends of their business, Solar City and Tesla, and it's kind of talking about those kind of here. Acquisition of Solar City. This is another one that if you're like 2 years from now and you're like, man, what's up with this Solar City? Tesla probably will cut and paste this into future 10Ks, but it might get phased out, might not get put in there. So if you ever want to know the details about the Solar City acquisition and maybe some more like, finite details about it, go back to the 10K in the year that the acquisition took place, or maybe the year after, and it should have a lot of that information. I know I've done that a lot of times where it's like a company doesn't bring forward all these details, and you're kind of picking up the story maybe a year later, 2 years later, and you want to go back and kind of look at what happened. That's another good reason to kind of dig through these 10Ks, or kind of know how to dig through them. Again, here we are looking at it again. This is assets acquired. This is the Solar City, showing you that this is how much cash they had on hand. This was essentially like their balance sheet, and this is how many this is the assets that were acquired. $8 billion worth of assets. Okay, and $60 billion company. That's not a small acquisition at all. And they're showing you that they paid this much because they had liabilities and debt and other stuff going on. Intangible assets, again, related. This is all related to, I believe, the Solar City, and they give you an idea of what they are here. More stuff, again, related to the solar acquisition that Tesla made. More about the property and plant. We might be getting back into some of Tesla's. This is like related to their entire business. More accrued liabilities, accrued purchases, payroll, expenses. Kind of interesting here. This is actually going through each line of I think this is the balance sheet where it's showing you it just has other long-term liabilities on the balance sheet. Well, it's saying this is what it consists of. Warranty reserve, built to suit. So, this number got huge. So, this is a number where you're like, whoa, why did this go up by over $1.1 billion? Well, you can see it was due to build to suit liability. You can look at the accrued liability and say, hey, what's this $1.2 billion consist of? You can come here and see what's consist of. Sometimes this is not in the 10Qs or the quarterly reports. So you might say, hey, what's accrued liability, or what's other? So anytime you see other and $1.8 billion on a balance sheet, and you're like, what's other? Here's where you can find it. Customer deposits talks about that. Here's more about their long-term debt. So this is, here's a summary of their debt. You can see they've got, man, I wish I could borrow money at this interest rate. This is compounded quarterly, but even then it's not that bad. Again, I wish, well, my mortgage is probably somewhere around there, but credit card debt and other kind of debt, boy, it'd be awesome to borrow at this kind of money. It's showing you, here's the interest rate. Gosh, some cheap debt. Even like some of these high numbers, it's like, this isn't that, everybody talks about, oh, the company has a lot of debt. Well, if it's at this interest rate and you're growing the revenue and the top line the way Tesla doing, again, you can see why. Again, there's a lot of Tesla people that are bashing Tesla. There's plenty of people that are short Tesla, a lot of people that are short Tesla, but you can see why the stock has performed really well. They're borrowing money at like dirt cheap rates, and they're growing their top line way in excess to cover this stuff. Okay. They're still going to have to keep raising money, but if you can raise money at these rates, I mean, do it all day long. Keep doing it. Here's, it's going to talk really in depth. You want to go to sleep is like read debt, like, debt facilities and recourse and all of that stuff. This is like, oftentimes on some companies, with Tesla, again, at this interest rate, I'm not really worried about it. It's a speculative position, not too worried about the shares that I do own. But maybe you do want to take a significant position in maybe a more speculative company. Well, you kind of want to read through all this stuff. And sometimes, again, I have to read through some of these sentences, not necessarily in Tesla's case, but in some cases, I have to read them like 4, 5, 6 times. Don't feel like you should be reading this like a Harry Potter or Stephen King novel, and it's just going to flow. And like, the better you get at reading this stuff, it's going to flow, read like a novel. It doesn't read like a novel. Sometimes you have to read word for word, and lawyers write this stuff up, so they're very careful with their word choice. And so, and oftentimes these are often tried to be presented in a favorable light, even when it's something negative about the company. So you really have to dig and really comprehend what's going on. So again, we're going through all the debt here, all the stuff that goes on with all this, having several $5 billion worth of debt. You're going to have pages and pages and pages of information about that. So more about the stock options and stuff. Shows you the number of options that are outstanding. It's a lot, but again, you kind of want to have the CEO and the company. Here's kind of an interesting. Our CEO earns a base salary that reflects the current applicable minimum wage in California law. So the CEO, Elon Musk, makes a minimum wage, but we know that the guy's loaded and he has some money. Might not be as rich as you'd think, but a lot of his assets are tied up into investments. But here's how he's going to hit different restricted stock units and how he's going to get paid. This is awesome. You don't see this with every company that you invest in. It's showing you performance milestones that need to be hit. Otherwise, old Elon Musk is going to be making, I don't know what the minimum wage out here in California, but it's probably close to 15 in Fremont and San Jose, where he's used to working. It's a little bit higher out there. So state of California might be closer to 10 or 12. I'm not really sure. But the CEO, chances are you can go and tell your mom and dad or your girlfriend or your wife or your husband, you likely make more salary than the CEO of Tesla. But if he hits these performances, he's going to make way more than you will probably in your whole life. Anyways, moving on. More stock-based competition. Income taxes. Again, this is it shows you domestic taxes right here. And this is an interesting line if they change income, corporate taxes essentially. If they change the corporate rate, this is a line that could get way more entertaining on every single company that you own. So cross your fingers and hope that gets done, because some of this money will flow to, instead of flowing to the Washington D.C., who can't do anything except argue with each other, make fun of each other, and get in fights, instead of flowing to them, so flow back into the company, and likely a little bit, not necessarily directly in the form of dividends or share buybacks or something like this, but this will flow back into the company in the form of an investment, buying a building, making more cars, hiring employees, etc., etc. So you hope that happens. And now, if you didn't know why Trump was elected president, now you know why. Because he ran on lowering this rate, basically, is why he won. Obviously, he didn't win by being politically correct or nice to people. Anyways, more provision of the income tax. State of California takes their tax. Federal. Oh, see, no federal tax. Okay. So in terms of, notice this, foreign. Woo. This is an interesting line. It's showing you that if Trump passes a federal corporate tax relief, it's not going to benefit Tesla. Okay. But Tesla is unique in the fact that it doesn't make any money. So it's not paying any federal. That's probably one of the primary reasons why it's not paying federal taxes. There might be other reasons why it's not, but other companies are not quite this lucky or this fortunate. Okay. So if this number is really big and we have, federal income tax reform or corporate tax reform, this would be very significant. In the case of Tesla, it means absolutely nothing. That may be why he left Trump's council, because it means nothing. He means nothing to him. These foreign taxes, though, boy, look at these. Whew. You'd like to see some, foreign tax reform, and then all of a sudden it will benefit Tesla. More stuff related to taxes, and you can get a CPA. They can explain more of that probably better that they do. Capital lease for equipment. Again, a company like Tesla, you're going to assume that they have lots of equipment, things like that. Here's this build-to-suit lease. New York. More legal proceedings. Okay, so they had one section earlier that wasn't quite this lengthy. This is much more what I expected. Okay, so a little bit more detail on some legal proceedings. Sometimes in these 10, especially when it's like negative, legal proceedings are typically viewed, even these could end up being positive for the company. They are going to do their best to bury this. So if you're looking for some, what you can do, again, highlight, anything legal. You could, copy and find that, or legal proceedings, and do a control and find for all this. It's typically what you want to do when you're trying to find something very specific in a 10Q document that's hundreds of pages long or 150 pages long. You want to find and replace the term you're looking for, and then you'll be able to find it in each section. Line of credit. Here we go. More stuff here. Again, more kind of a look at the balance sheet here. I think this is relates to their solar energy. More kind of again, not that I'm going over this stuff, not that you shouldn't read it, but for the sake of this video, just know that these details are here. And I don't know if you necessarily, again, need to read 101 pages to get to this stuff and say, oh, this is what their lease path through obligation. You really should be looking for this specifically. Maybe find this out. Well, they have this lease path through financing obligation. What is that? And I'm just showing you that likely the explanation of it, some further details about it, are likely going to always be in the annual reports. And that's what's always really cool about it. Quarterly results. Here we actually see some. This is what's typically featured on like a 10Q. They basically copied and pasted this, showed you their entire year quarter by quarter, which is kind of nice. You can see, people got more into buying Teslas as the year went on here. Same here. This is due to Tesla, I think, came out with a new model. I believe this was 2016 was the year they came out with the Model X, so that could explain why this number got really big. But you might say, hey, what if they don't release a new model? How do sales, are they lumpy? Are they, some companies like a retail store is going to be all focused here kind of in this fourth quarter. As you see with Tesla, demand for their vehicles is pretty strong the whole year. And then you have kind of a bump in the end, maybe for Christmas, maybe for like year-end tax purposes. People buy or lease a car for next year's taxes. I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but that's kind of interesting. It could be that they came out with a model at the end of this year. I don't know. But found this kind of interesting that the demand for Teslas is pretty consistent month over month, and that's always interesting to see. Obviously, you would like to see this number just growing steadily. It's not, but that could be due to manufacturing constraints and the way Tesla's making the cars. So it's showing, this is really cool, showing their total revenues. Here it is United States, here it is in China, here it is in Norway, here it is, other places in the world. Really cool. So you can see, wow, look at China. They really are starting to love their Teslas. Same with the United States. Really started loving their Teslas. Okay, Norway, look. Norway's actually getting a little less interested in their Teslas. Okay, or what this could be saying is Norway is a smaller geographical area, and likely the people that can afford a $100,000 car are tapped out at the moment. Those people aren't, appearing out of the blue. Whereas in the United States, China, that market is less penetrated. That's a really interesting, thing there. And that's really about it, guys. Honestly, you get down here, and you're getting into a lot of like mumbo jumbo. This could, lead you to other stuff. Read other documents, showing you, I think, where it's pulling these. It's from this 10K dated here, so you can go back to the investor relation page and read the original 8K or the 10Q or the annual report that it originated from. And it's a lot of like legal mumbo jumbo after this. We're getting to the stock certificate, and that's about it. Honestly, this is all. What's cool about here is a glossary of terms. Okay, so if you're like, I don't know what do they mean when they talk about stock options? What are stock options? Well, it'll tell you a little bit about some of the finer points of stock options down here. What's restricted stock? I don't know what restricted stock is. Well, it'll tell you a little bit here, a little bit more about it. What are restricted stock units? It'll tell you what they are, not necessarily in plain English, but it'll give you a little bit further details down here, and that's always kind of interesting with these. Talking more about the compensation, this isn't something you should blow over. Oftentimes the companies bury down in here like how much they're getting paid, how many how many shares they've been awarded. Salaries are often buried down here near the bottoms of these. But this gives you subsidiaries of Tesla. This is kind of interesting. If you're like, hey, what does this company, look at all these solar companies and look at all these subsidiaries. Look at all these, like, all these other companies. Zep Solar, that is actually Tesla. So, and you always, not always, but they tend to end these things with, again, we're repeating. Here we are back at the balance sheet again. This is actually Solar City's balance sheet. And it is kind of nice that they're going through, they actually give you all of Solar Cities. So that's what I was saying earlier. Like, if you were like, man, what was Solar City like before Tesla acquired it? I believe they were a public company already, so their documents are out there and will be out there. But if they were a private company, that's honestly about it. I mean, my recording stopped because that's probably a good place to stop. A lot of the stuff will start repeating itself. Again, we're all into Solar Cities Corporation. It looks like they've just done a copy and paste here. Not that you shouldn't go through this stuff, but here we are finally towards the end of their final closing words on the Solar City. And that's it. So congratulations. You made it through Form 10K of Tesla Incorporated. Again, full disclosure, I own a couple shares. I only like 6 or 7 shares of Tesla. Obviously wish I had owned more, but it's a speculative stock that has performed extremely well over the last couple years. But don't take any of this as investing advice. It is all my own opinion. The reason why I'm giving you my opinion on how to read a financial document is so you don't have to go to YouTube or CNBC or Seeking Alpha and take the word of some guy or girl recommending a stock. You can take that as a tip, which you really should. All these articles and all this stuff on Tesla, you should take it as a tip to go read the financial reports yourself and then make a determination if Tesla you think is worth buying in at a valuation of $60 billion when Ford is $50 billion. So, it's almost odd. The reason why I laugh is it's almost odd saying that, but it is true. And we can see the performance of Ford. It has gone from an $8 stock 5 years ago to 12, which is almost a double. And as we've seen, Tesla was down here at a sub $50 stock, and now it's at 350. So obviously the performance has been quite spectacular over at Tesla, but it did trace sideways for many years. It's really made this last leg up here as it's ramped up into its production of cars outside of the luxurious Model S. So again, hope you enjoyed this video. Leave any questions or any comments in the below in the YouTube section here. I try to answer any and all questions, any suggestions for future videos. Shout them out. Any companies you want me to go through, I try to get to all of them. Obviously, I'm not churning out videos on that regular basis. I do have a family. I do have other ways I make money, and I don't rely on YouTube to make any money. But any kind of suggestion that you do have, this Tesla video did come from numerous people wanted me to do Tesla, and I've been meaning to do it for a few months now. So just finally got around to it. But leave me a suggestion, leave me a question, and hit the subscribe button if you like what you heard. Appreciate it. Thanks again. Happy investing.